And I had just grieved so miserably, and this light came and seemed to be comforting me in that grief. And again, it felt like I was rising above the hospital bed, like I was rising up, and I found myself in the most beautiful place. I've heard words like heaven, the spirit world, the other side. The one word or the only word that seems to capture what I was experiencing is I was home.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Channel Within. I am Mira, and today I'm excited to be talking with Jeffrey Olsen about his remarkable NDE. Hi, Jeffrey, and welcome to Channel Within.
Oh, hi, Mira. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
Awesome. The feeling is mutual. And so, can we get started with life before your NDE?
Yes. Gosh, I grew up on a little family farm. I have two brothers. It was a rough and tumble lifestyle. I went away to college. I left the farm, went to university on a football scholarship, and fell madly in love, madly head over heels in love in college, and eventually married Tamra and my late wife. And then we had two boys. About 3 years into the marriage, Spencer was born. And then there was complications getting another child. And 6 years after that, Griffin, my youngest son, was born. And I had a degree in marketing, advertising. I was a creative person. Tamara was teaching high school. And we were, just a normal family, just making things work, chasing our careers, raising the kids, and doing the best we knew how with what we had.
Awesome. It sounds like life was really good.
Life was really
Yeah.
good. We were very happy and things were going really well.
Okay, so let's go to the day of the NDE then,
Okay.
if you could walk us through that.
Yes. And I want to point out it's been almost 30 years since the NDE. And there was a decade I couldn't even talk about it. There was 10 years. It was too painful, too personal. And yet enough time has passed now. I can talk openly. And I'll go back, almost 30 years. And it was a family vacation. We had taken a road trip. We put the kids in the car and went from northern Utah to southern Utah, actually to visit my wife's family. Her parents and her grandparents were there, and it was Easter. It was the Easter weekend, so we went down to visit family and to celebrate Easter, which we did. We had a lovely vacation, a lovely trip, and Monday morning came, and it was time to go back to work. And we had about a 5-hour drive ahead of us. And we got up that morning and we lingered. We had breakfast. We talked. We finally got to the point where, I said, it's time to go. We've got to load everybody up and get on the road. And I got all the luggage put in the car. I got the kids loaded in. We said our goodbyes, and we were just pulling away from the curb. I was actually driving away from the house. And just as I pulled out, Tamra, my wife, said, "Stop, wait." And I thought she'd left something behind. I thought, oh gosh, she's left her handbag in the kitchen or something. But I stopped the car and she looked at me and she said, "I just want to say goodbye to mom and dad one more time." And in that moment, I'll admit, I thought, oh, gosh, we've said goodbye. I got to get, let's get on the road. We've got to get home. But I watched and I noticed as she jumped out and as she ran up to the porch, and she not only hugged her mom and dad, but she kissed them both. And that was not abnormal, but I noticed it. And I only share that because as the day played out, that was the last goodbye. And there's a very poignant lesson there. It's like she must have had an idea. She must have had a premonition, an intuition, and she acted on it. I think often we get these feelings, we get these ideas, we get these inspirations, but she literally said, "Stop, wait. I want to go say goodbye to mom and dad," and she did. And that was that was the beginning of what became a tragic day, but also a very enlightening day, because she ran and jumped in the car. We buckled up, away we went. I got on the interstate. I put the car cruise control on 75 miles an hour. It's as fast as I could legally go. And I was in a hurry, to get home. And I even had a moment, I was driving and I just looked in the rearview mirror, just a glance to see, what traffic was doing, if there was any traffic. And in that glance, I noticed my little son, Griffin, just a toddler. He was 14 months old and he was sound asleep in his car seat. Now, and I'm talking about a moment, it was simply a glance. And I thought, wow, there's our miracle boy. We were told we may not have more children, and there he is. And I also heard Spencer, my 7-year-old, playing with action figures behind me and making all the joyful noise of a little boy. And I glanced over at Tamra, my wife, and she had by that time reclined her seat back and she was sound asleep, but she was still holding on to my hand. And again, it was a moment. It was just a glance and a moment, but I thought, wow, we're 10 years into this marriage. We're raising these kids and chasing our careers, and she's still holding on to my hand. I had this profound moment of gratitude, like, wow, look what I'm surrounded with. And of course, my attention went back to the road, and it was probably an hour or so after that we had a horrific automobile accident. There was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a pickup truck that was driving erratically on the interstate. I think one of the most difficult things about the story is I believe I may have just dozed off at the wheel. I may have just nodded off for a second. And there's no excuse for that.
Jeffrey, thank you for sharing that vulnerability and for being authentic, because on long drive it has happened to some of us, me included.
Oh, good. I'm not the only one. And I don't recall being tired. I don't recall, and there's all these reasons. Gosh, I'm a young father. I'm working those 12, 14-hour days to provide for the family. But I believe I may have just nodded off. And in doing so, I swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left. And in doing so, I lost control of the car. And it then began to roll, not off the road, but down the road at 75 miles per hour. It was a horrific automobile accident. And I blacked out for the actual rolling. I was aware, wow, I've lost control of the car. We're crashing. And then I blacked out. But when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. I'm like, wow, the first thing I heard was Spencer, my 7-year-old, crying hysterically in the back seat. I'm like, wow, I've got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned. I was struggling to breathe. I felt as if I was losing consciousness. And I was unaware of my injuries. What had actually happened to me is both of my legs were crushed. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. It was damaged so badly. My back had been damaged. My rib cage had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had nearly been completely pulled off. It was all pulled out. There was no rotator cuff or muscle holding it on. And then the seatbelt had cut through and ruptured all my insides. I was an absolute mess physically. But the adrenaline, of, oh, I've got to get to my son, kicked in. He's crying. I need to get to him. But that's when, that's when I realized no one else was crying. And this is what was so difficult to talk about for so many years. I became aware, and I knew and I saw, and I don't go into the details necessarily of that, but I knew that Tamra, my wife, and that Griffin, my youngest son, were gone, and they were killed instantly in the accident. And I mean, that, that was a horrible place to be. I mean, here I am trapped. I'm losing consciousness. I'm pinned, under the car. I can't get to anyone. I know half the family has passed, and I was driving. I mean, the guilt and the panic. I kept thinking, can't I get those 3 seconds back? Can't I somehow? What happened? How? It was just absolute horror. And yet it was in that darkness, it was in that panic that I felt light come. And when I say that, I felt as if light came and surrounded me. It was tangible light, like it was love. It was comforting me in this horrible situation. And then it felt like I was rising above the accident scene, as if I was being delivered out of this horrific situation. And I'll admit I was a little confused. I'm like, how can I be okay? Wow, now I can breathe fine. There's no pain. And in that slight confusion, suddenly in that light, and it felt as if it was a bubble of light, like a holding place of light. Suddenly, Tamra, my wife, is right there with me. She's right there. And she's very much alive. And she's gorgeous. She wasn't displaying any of the injuries from the accident. And she's right there. And even that was, it was like, oh, you're okay. But I was aware of what had happened at the accident scene. So there was a little bit of confusion, but there she was. And she was emphatic that I have to go. In fact, she was urgent. You've got to go. You can't stay. You've got to go back. You can't be here. And we literally had a conversation about if I stayed with her, Spencer, my oldest son, would be orphaned. And we didn't want that. And for whatever reason, she couldn't come back. Now, her injuries were extensive, even worse than mine. Well, let me back up on that. She had, because she was sleeping in the seat, she had her seatbelt on, but it didn't restrain her properly. And she had suffered severe head trauma. That's what took her life. She wasn't as banged up on her whole body. And I don't know why I'm going to that detail, but I was aware of that at the scene of the accident. And yet here she is, beautiful, gorgeous, no injuries. And she's emphatic, you've got to go. And it was such a visceral experience. It was very tangible, just like it would be in this third dimension. I mean, she was crying, she was upset, and yet the senses seemed to be magnified. Like I could taste her tears, I could feel her heart. And she would push my chest. She'd say, "You got to go, you got to go, you can't stay, you've got to go back," as if there was, an urgency, a time frame. You've got to go back. And then she would pull me close, and we would weep and hold each other. And then it was like, no, you've got to go, you got to go. And it's the most profound goodbye I'll ever say. But we made that choice that I'm going back. I'm going back. And it's interesting how powerful our thoughts are. I mean, I didn't have to figure out, well, how do I go back? It was just like, okay, I made that decision. My intention is to go back. And then just like, it was like almost immediately I found myself moving about a very busy level 1 trauma center, hospital. I have no concept of time in this goodbye. I mean, I later found out that people arrived at the scene. The first couple to arrive, actually, the man was a physician. He was able to see to Spencer, my 7-year-old. He was actually able to see to me and perhaps perform some life-saving, immediate, first aid, getting air in my lungs, doing the things that had to happen there. But I had to be extricated from the car, and then I was airlifted or life flighted to the nearest level 1 hospital. Spencer, my 7-year-old, was banged up pretty good, but he he basically walked away from the accident, thank goodness. But I was unaware of any of that. All I knew was I'd crashed the car. Half the family had passed. I'd said this profound goodbye.
Yeah.
Here I am wandering through this very busy level 1 trauma center. And I'm so aware. It's like I had 360 awareness of everything. I mean, the doctors, the nurses, the other patients, even the families of the other patients, and everyone I encountered. There was this oneness. There was this connection. It's as if I knew them, but that mean they were strangers in this realm. But I knew their hearts. I knew their love. I knew their hate. I knew their motivations. I knew their challenges. I knew everything about their lives. And there was no judgment. There was this loving, profound connection. And I was feeling this with everyone I encountered until I came to a body, a man on the gurney I didn't feel anything from, which I found odd given this connection I was feeling to everything. So I stepped closer and looked, and that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. It was not me. I was having this profound connected experience, but there was my body. There was the skin suit that I had worn through life. And there was a profound sadness and a realization. The sadness was, wow, look how banged up I am. And in the same instant, it's like, wow, I took it for granted. I did not realize what a miracle machine our bodies are. It's like I don't have to think about my lungs breathing. I don't have to remind my heart to beat. I saw the body as this absolute miracle, miraculous. And mine was so banged up. Mine was so injured. And I knew I've got to get back in, or I've got to get back with the body. And once again, it wasn't about figuring out how. It was just the knowing, the intention. I'm going in. I'm connecting with, I'm getting back in. And with that thought, then boom, I'm back in the body, but back to all the pain, the grief, the trauma, the guilt, the regret. It was so heavy. And I was ventilated. They had a big tube doing the breathing for my lungs. My legs were immobile, having been crushed. My right arm was immobile, having been pulled out. And they actually eventually tied down my left hand because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. And there I was, just, I mean, be still. There was a whole new meaning to be still. I had no, I just lay there and be with it. And I was in the hospital for a long time. Of course, I was in ICU, and I was in the hospital for almost, almost 6 months. Yeah, I had 18 surgeries in all, putting me back together. I had profound experiences in the hospital.
So your connection to the other side was not severed once you came back?
No, I don't believe it was. I mean, that was an interesting thing. And I mean, Tamra was not gone. Like, she would come and call it a dream, call it a vision. I mean, at one point, she was sharing with me specific details about where, I mean, it sounds almost trivial sometimes, but she wanted her cousin to have that ring. She wanted her sister-in-laws to have her fancy dresses. It was, but then there was also specific things about where she wanted to be buried. She wanted the baby in her arms. And I had no idea. Of course, I was in and out of consciousness. I was in terrible shape, but I had no idea the families were actually discussing this and trying to figure it out. Do they bury Tamra in southern Utah with Griffin in the family lot? And what about me? At this point, they didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And what about Spencer, my 7-year-old? The family had been in this conversation. And at one point, they took the ventilator out. In fact, they were going to transfer me to a different hospital. And that was something everybody thought, oh, we can't, it was an insurance issue, which is funny. But they're like, we can't do that. And yet in transferring, they took out the ventilator briefly, and I was conscious enough to talk. And here I am telling the family, Tamara has been speaking to me. She wants to be buried in this place. She wants the baby in her arms in the same casket. She wants this song sung at her services. I mean, here I am sharing all this with the family. And rather than thinking I was crazy, they were like, wow, he's answering every question we've had about what do we do? I mean, it was devastating to both sides of the family, and to attempt to make those decisions quickly. And of course, it was an untimely death. I was only 33. Tamra was 31. I mean, no one was expecting this. No one had made plans for what do we do? And yet she had been communicating with me. And I'm quite sure from her perspective in that other realm, she knew the family was in turmoil. She knew they were, having trouble deciding. She knew things had to be resolved. And somehow as you said, that door didn't shut. She was able to communicate to me, and by a weird circumstance of having to be transferred and taking the ventilator out, I'm able to share with the family what she's been communicating. And, that's just one aspect of things that happened in the hospital that were amazing. In fact, and this is unique perhaps to my NDE, there was 2 members of my trauma team when they life flighted me in there, both the attending physician, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, and one of the nurses. And they shared this with me while I was in the hospital, which that's a miracle. I mean, they typically wouldn't share, but it was the nurse. She's the one that kept saying, we've got to go tell that guy what happened. And I was still very sick, but they came in and I didn't recognize them. I'm like, I'm not sure who these people are. They weren't in their scrubs. They weren't in there. It was their day off. But they came and shared with me that when I was life flighted into the hospital, and keep in mind, they didn't know me from Adam. They didn't know I had had a profound experience. They said, when they life flighted you in, we went into the surgical arena, and they said, your wife was there. Her soul, her spirit was there. And the nurse was emotional about it. And she said, we've just felt so powerfully that we needed to come share this with you. And I was just listening, but I began to be emotional, seeing her tears and realizing this. And I looked over at the doctor, and he just affirmed. He's like, yes. And he said to me, he said, she was there. I saw her and she communicated with me. And of course I said, what did she communicate? And he said, she simply communicated how thankful she was that we were saving your life. And I burst into tears. I'm like, of course she did. That's who she is. But also, they didn't know. They didn't know I had had that conversation. They didn't know I'd given my word to come back and raise our son. And so, of course, she was grateful for what they were doing, knowing that they were going to bring me back and bring me here and put me back together. And,
That's just, that is so beautiful, Jeffrey, for, clinicians to have that shared experience with you both, and then with Tamara, and then for them to come on their day off to share it with you. That is remarkable.
It really is. They showed such courage and such intuition. Again, they had a feeling, they had an inspiration. And it's funny. The doctor, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, we become good friends. He said the nurse kept pestering him and saying, "We've got to go tell him." And he's like, "No, no, we don't. You don't do, And she's the one that really, was the driving force for them to come share. But then when he did share that, I actually said, "Wow, I had an experience myself." And I shared that with them. I thought they're clinicians, they're doctors. Like if I'm crazy, they'll take me to the psych ward and get me the assistance I deserve to have. But they just listened. And Dr. O'Driscoll has experienced many things. He spent 25 years as a level 1 trauma physician. And this was not the first time he had spiritual, mystical, other dimensional experiences in the ER. And he's actually written a book on his 25 years in the ER and what he experienced. And he's become a very dear friend. And
Yeah, that's an awesome bond to share that experience with
yeah,
Tamara, for sure.
yeah. And it's interesting. The doctor just recently had his daughter pass away. Now, she was a grown woman and a mother, but died very young of cancer. And so, you see how these things play out. I mean, there he was to support me as a young man when my child had passed and my wife had passed. And now, that we're older and grayer, I'm there to support he and his wife in their passing of their daughter. And it's so crazy how the world works, or how spirit works, or how the greater good of all of us work, that we would be, friends in such circumstances. And it is unique, and they were courageous. I mean, doctors don't they don't talk about that. I mean, that's probably not even very popular at all in the medical community.
Absolutely. They're not encouraged to have these conversations. So kudos to them, for that bravery, like you said. Um, Thank you so much for sharing the near death experience on the site of the accident itself, because it's a testament to love. You felt love. You were in a bubble of light and love. You met Tamara there. So, and it's because of love that you came back. So it seems like love is so integral in these NDEs.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I will forever be changed based on wandering about the hospital and feeling that oneness, that connection to everyone. There was no judgment, just love. And perhaps the most profound experience happened at the end of my hospital stay. And it's worth pointing out, I mean, the two most profound out of body or near death experiences were at the scene of the accident, before all the morphine and narcotics had been administered at the hospital. And then at the end of my hospital stay, when I was off of all the narcotics, I was out of ICU, I was out of surgical recovery, I was out of regular hospital, I was in the rehabilitation wing. And I was finally able to lay on my side, which is my natural way of sleeping. They had finally stabilized my abdomen and the injuries there to where I could lay on my side. And I had laid so long on my back, I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. I was bald on the back of my head from laying on my back so long. And I had grieved so miserably. I mean, the physical trauma was one thing, but the emotional trauma was so intense. And on this particular night, I was able to roll on my side and I fell into a peaceful sleep. Now, this was the strange thing. I was completely conscious that I was in peaceful sleep, which seems kind of strange. Um,
Paradoxical, for sure.
yeah, I know I had slept and I had certainly been unconscious, but I realized, wow, I'm finally sleeping peacefully. And I felt that same light come again, just like at the accident scene. I felt this light come and surround me, and it felt comforting in my grief. I mean, I had been, well, Griffin, my little son, and I grieved, and I still grieve both my wife and my child, but it had been so miserable. His car seat had broken apart, and he had been ejected from the car, and I knew that at the scene, and I had just grieved so miserably, and this light came and seemed to be comforting me in that grief. And again, it felt like I was rising above the hospital bed, like I was rising up. But this time, the light dispensed, it went away. Um, and I found myself in the most beautiful place. I've heard words like heaven, the spirit world, the other side. The one word or the only word that seems to capture what I was experiencing is I was home. I was home. I was in this most beautiful place, and it felt so familiar and so welcoming. And I was whole. I mean, I looked down and I had both legs and both feet, and I actually began to run. I was running, and it was such a sensual experience, physical. Like I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet, and I could feel the intelligence in my toes and in my calves and in my thighs. I was joyfully running and thinking, I'm home. I'm home and I'm whole. And the grief seemed to be subsided. And yet at that point I had this knowing, this message, I'm not there to stay. And in that moment, there was this corridor off to my left, and I knew intuitively I wanted to go this way. And so I began to head down that corridor. And as I did, at the end of the corridor, I saw a crib. And now Griffin, only being 14 months old, he was still sleeping in a crib at the time of the accident. I mean, he was mischievous. He was climbing up and sneaking out of it. But I raced to this crib and I looked in, and there was my little boy, and he was perfect. He was sleeping, and I picked him up as a father would. And again, like I say, it felt so physical. I could feel there's a weight and a heat, to picking up a sleeping child. And I felt that, and I held him against me, and he felt solid. And I could feel his rib cage expanding. I could feel him breathing. I could feel his breath on my neck. I was absolutely overjoyed and overcome. I began to weep, thinking I'm holding my son. And I reached over and I smelled his hair. And even that, like the senses again, seemed to be multiplied. And as I'm holding him, I felt this presence behind me, this overwhelming, cosmic, wise, powerful. It was coming closer and closer, and I'm holding my little boy, and I'm weeping, thinking, wow, I'm really holding him. And then as the presence became closer and closer, it was right behind me, and the guilt of the accident again bubbling up. I'm like, wow, I mean, my son's here because I crashed the car. I mean, his life was cut short because I screwed up and dozed off or overcorrected. And the guilt was just coming up, and this presence, this powerful presence is right behind me. And, I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and I'm thinking, that's God. And I'm in so much trouble. And I'm holding my son, and I had the thought, I hope I can be forgiven somehow. And that's when you talk about love in that thought. And this almost felt physical. These divine arms wrapped around and held me and my little boy. And there was so much love. And it's like the whole lid just came off. There was this download that seemed to just flow through my entire being. And the first thing was, there's nothing to forgive. I'd had this thought, I hope I can be forgiven. And it was like, there's nothing to forgive. Everything's in divine order. And I thought, how can that be? I mean, here I am arguing with the divine, how can it be in divine order? He's here. I'm maimed for life. Half the family's gone. And what about Spencer, my surviving son? I mean, I'm having all these thoughts. And as I have that, my life unfolds before my eyes. You hear the thing, well, your life flashes before your eyes. But here I was watching my life, and I was seeing the divine order in all of it. I was seeing it so much differently. And there was nothing but love. There was no judgment. I mean, I was looking at things and I was even saying, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And the divine being that held me simply asked, what did you learn? What did you learn? And so I'm seeing it different than judgment. I'm seeing it in lesson. And I'm still feeling like, well, but I failed. I failed at life. And I did believe that life was a test. I believed that life was a test and the angels were keeping score, and I was definitely failing the test. And these thoughts, as I had them, were immediately addressed by the divine. I mean, the God that held me said, no, 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 my boy, life is not a test. It's a gift. It's a gift. And I was seeing my life now as a gift in divine order. Even the things, I thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway. And I'm having all this judgment, and the beloved being that held me said, that's your judgment of it, not mine, not mine. And there was so much love, and it was multiplied. Like, here I am holding my child. And to me, he is perfect. He is beloved. He is divine. And I'm feeling all of that. And yet it's being magnified by the being who holds me. It's like, wow, I'm a child of that. I'm a manifestation of the divine, just like my son is a manifestation of me and Tamra. And it was a very personal experience, but I knew that it rippled out to the entire universe, like every living soul. And it did feel like the entire universe was observing this, like that there was just concourses, not just one being holding me, but concourses of angels observing, watching, supporting, masculine, feminine. I mean, it was all. It's really difficult to find the words to explain it, except it was pure, unconditional love. And I was told, look, you can be mad at God the rest of your life because this accident happened. You weren't protected. I mean, I had that thought. Why didn't I get a premonition? If Tamra was told, go hug mom and dad, how come I wasn't told, pull the car off, stop the car? I was having all these thoughts, and I was told, you can be mad at God the rest of your life because it happened. I was also told I could beat myself up for the rest of my life because I was driving the car. And those were all choices. They would love me still, no matter what. But I was given a third choice. And I was told, you can give your son, you can hand him over. And maybe it won't feel like he was taken away. Maybe you get to, and this was part of the download, you get to exercise your will and make a choice. And in all that love and all that peace and all that beauty, I kissed my little boy. And I gave him back. There's days I'm like, why didn't I just hold on? But I gave him back, and then I'm back in the hospital bed to all the injuries and all that went on, and near death experiences, out of body experiences, spiritual experiences, mystical experiences. I don't have words for it. I wasn't almost dead in that experience. At the scene of the accident, yeah, I was almost dead. That was a near death experience. But perhaps this last experience, as I was ready to go home, was a gift. I mean, it had already happened. I couldn't change the accident. I couldn't change that they had passed. But maybe the universe loved me so much. It's like, look, it just knew I had to hold my little boy. And it knew that maybe in the experience of making a choice and giving him back, that would provide some healing. That otherwise, who knows where I'd be or what I'd be doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that
Oh, you're so welcome.
beautiful story.
You're so welcome. And I can talk now about it. I couldn't share it I just cry. I still get a little bit emotional about it because it was so profound. And, there was big insights. I mean, that was the other dimensional stuff, but in coming home, I eventually got better and I was going to go home, and I wasn't going home to my house. I was going to my brother's house. They had taken an extra bedroom and put a hospital bed in it and, build a ramp for me. I mean, I was in an electric wheelchair. My left leg was amputated. My right leg was in a brace sticking straight out. My right arm was in a sling. They had finally reconstructed and reconnected all the muscles. They were doing this strange shock therapy to see if they could get the nerves to regenerate. And all I could do is drive this wheelchair with my one working left hand. So I was quite a sight. Colostomy bag because of all the ruptured intestines. I mean, I was quite a sight coming home. But it was time to go home. And my brothers were so good to me. I mean, gosh, they'd opened their doors. They'd taken Spencer in like he was one of their own. He had gone to school with his cousins. I mean, and now I was coming to their home to get better till I could return to my own home. But I was so worried about Spencer. Like, what is he'd seen me in the hospital, but I was going home on his turf. I mean, he would come to the hospital and I would be under the covers and he'd jump up on the bed and we would cry mostly and sometimes laugh and sometimes sit in silence. But now I was going away from the hospital and we might have to go to the grocery store. Like, how is this going to look? And of course, my brothers came to get me. They came to get me and bring me home. And at that point, they would literally have to pick me up and put me in the wheelchair. I mean, I couldn't transfer with no limbs working. And they came and got me, and we were going toward my younger brother's house. And, we pulled up in the driveway, and I'm so concerned about Spencer. And how do I explain a colostomy bag? And, all this stuff. But we pulled up in the driveway and there I see him. He's looking out. He's watching, as my brothers, his uncles, pick me up and put me in the wheelchair. And I'm thinking, gosh, I was the rough and tumble father. How is this going to go? I'm never going to be the same. And I was so concerned. And I began to drive toward the house, and they'd build a ramp for me to get in the house with. And Spencer came running out. And he ran toward me, but then he ran right past me. And I just thought, it's too much. It's too much. This is too overwhelming. And I continued toward the ramp, and I turned the wheelchair to just navigate up the ramp. And I thought, I wondered where he went. So I just looked to see where he went. And he'd actually run across the street, and he was knocking on all the neighbors' doors. And he was shouting, "Come out, come out. My dad has made it home. Come see my dad." And I was so moved. Mm-hmm. And he made the rounds, and then he came and he threw himself on my lap right in the wheelchair, which just about killed me because I still had all the sutures from the abdomen repair. And I share this for a specific reason. I mean, there I was, and I explained to him, he was a Star Wars fan. I'm like, look, they're going to make me a Darth Vader leg, and I'm going to work so hard to get better. And, they'll fix the colostomy and they'll get my knee better, and I will be walking, but it's going to be a while. This is going to take some hard work. And can you do this? He's a little boy, he's 7. But he looked at me at that point and he said, "Dad, if you were nothing but a puddle of blood, I would still love you." We laughed and cried together. And the reason I share this is here I was, all banged up in a wheelchair, holding my surviving son. And suddenly that was no less profound or divine than being on the other side holding my son who had passed. Heaven was right here. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to become. There was nothing to do but be in that moment and feel that family love, the unconditional love of a child, which felt as powerful as the unconditional love of God. And I realized, wow, life is a gift. Perhaps heaven is right here. And even now, 30 years later, as I've grown old and become gray, and I will look at a sunset or a sunrise or a flower, or I'm on the farm where we're having the baby calves are being born. And I'm like, life is a miracle. It is a gift. And wow, I get one more day. I'm granted one more day. And, Spencer's grown, he's married, he's made me a grandfather. I've got a little grandson now. And life has been blessed. There's been tragedy, but it's been really a beautiful experience, lesson. I mean, I've probably learned more from the painful things than the joyful things, but perhaps the painful things are what creates the reservoir to receive more joy. And yeah, I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning. I might be, it's funny. My book is titled "Knowing," and now it's like I don't know anything, but I'm completely comfortable not knowing.
That is so profound. You're here for it all, for the highs, the lows, the duality, because it's where we learn the most. And thank you so much, Jeffrey, for that. Is there anything that feels important to share that we didn't talk about yet?
Oh, yeah, there are. I mean, there are things. I mean, here's the takeaways. Number one, we don't die. I was very much alive. Tamra was very much alive when she said, "You got to go back." Griffin was very much alive when I held him in my arms. So death is not the end. We are eternal beings. We're having a human experience. And of course, it's joyful and painful, and there's grief and there's bliss and there's all of the lessons and experiences. But we're eternal beings. That was one thing that really hit me when I was in the arms of the divine, is we come from love. We are love. And we're having experiences that don't feel like love, that our soul expands and grows. Also, the world can be an interesting place. So much division, so much turmoil, so much war, so much, horrible things happen in this third dimension. And when I was in the hospital, and everyone I encountered, no matter what, it didn't matter who they were or what they believed or where they had been or where they hadn't been or what they had done, there was so much love. Perhaps we can lean into that. If there was a message, it's like we come from love, and we're eternal beings having an earthly or human experience. But perhaps we can embrace each other differently. Perhaps we can put aside our differences. Perhaps we can put aside race, culture, religion, beliefs, gender, all of it, and just lock arms and walk together in peace. If there's a way to illuminate peace rather than the division, rather than hate, rather than anything that isn't love, and maybe that's what the universe is watching for. Like, when will we finally put differences aside and walk together and love each other and be the divine beings that we are, above and beyond a human experience?
That's really profound. What's reincarnation or past lives? Did you get a peek at those topics, or not really?
I didn't, but here's the thing. I was so aware in the arms of the divine that I was eternal. In fact, my question was, why would you do this to me? Thinking that, it was God's will. And it was like, oh no, you created this for the expansion of your own soul, and you've always been, and you will always be. I mean, it was almost like I became divine. And although I didn't see a past life in the near-death experience, I've had experiences in my life and in this realm where it's like, wow, I've been here before. There's something here. So I totally embrace, if we're eternal beings, and perhaps this is the learning ground. Well, what would love do? Love might say, okay, go do it again, and this time, look at this differently, or this time you're going to have experiences that will expand your soul in different ways, or maybe I was the bad guy once upon a time and now I get to be different, or maybe I'm the bad guy now. I don't know, but I fully embrace that if we're eternal beings, love would provide a way for us to expand, to grow, and to really embrace our divinity in ways that maybe we don't in this realm or in this iteration of our eternal selves.
I spoke with someone recently who said that we make pacts to learn for ourselves and others who come with us to help us learn. So wouldn't it be like cool if Tamara and Griffin had made that pact
Yeah.
for them to leave in that really profound, sad manner so that you can get any those
Yes.
gems.
Yes. I believe that when I was experiencing everything in divine order, it's like, oh, wow. So I created this, we created this, and this time they loved me enough to go. I'm holding my son. It's like, wow, Griffin agreed to break my heart in ways that I could never imagine, that it might expand. And once again, he's not dead. He's very much alive. In fact, he's become my guardian. I've had dreams and visions of Griffin where he's not a toddler. He's a powerful, grown young man that actually looks out for his old man. I mean, I really believe the loved ones that pass in our lives, they become our guardian angels. And I also embrace that we may have soul groups. We might stick together through thick and thin, even when we're not all right here in the same place.
I really like what you talked about, the oneness in the hospital setting and putting aside our differences, because when I attended a Buddhist meditation once, we were being told, why would we harbor any hate for anyone? Because we've had so many lifetimes together that at some point we were caregivers for, different people. And so thank you so much for that reminder. Um, Jeffrey, I have three questions that I'd like to ask you. What brings you joy and laughter these days?
Oh wow, joy! Well, joy in grandchildren. Yes, that's. I mean, that's just beautiful. My little grandson, his name is Maverick, and he can't
Beautiful
say
name.
he can't say Grandpa Jeff, so he calls me Papa Chief. Hope that one sticks. So I find joy in that, and I find joy in the little things. I mean, really, truly, like, people will say, well, you must have been preserved and lived for a great cause. And I'm like, yeah, you know, to play catch with my grandson, to watch another sunset, to, feel the breeze on my face and in my hair. I mean, I find so much joy in the little things. And I've really embraced, and I know the little things are the big things. There's things we think are so big and important, and it's like, nope. If you can sit and feel the rain fall on your skin, that's the big thing. That's what's important.
For sure. What would you tell young Jeffrey who's about to embark on this journey?
Hmm. Wow, you ask such great questions, Mira. Keep breathing, keep going, and remember to love yourself. all this love, all this love that I felt from the divine, all this love I felt for other people that could have been classified as strangers, I suppose. I would remind young Jeff to love himself more and to embrace himself more and to have more grace and compassion and forgiveness for himself.
Beautiful. And what final message or blessing do you have for anyone listening?
Oh, wow. Well, the biggest lessons in the arms of the divine was choice. You have free will, you get to choose. And so I suppose I would say, remember that. Remember that we get to choose, and above all else, let's choose love. Let's choose joy. Let's choose peace and make that choice within ourselves. And perhaps that will ripple out, if even to the people under our roof, if even to our immediate little cluster here, choose peace, choose joy, and choose love because we have a choice.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey. And thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your remarkable story. And, most importantly, telling us about the beautiful gems that you learned along the way, and in doing so, helping us learn as well.
Oh, thank you, Mira. It's been an honor.